Hello and welcome to the Amplitude Ecommerce webcast, where we talk about all things that make e-commerce better or more profitable or more safe. And with that in mind, proud to have with us here today, Justin Harris. Justin is Chief Information Security Officer and founder of Ion Technology here in Los Angeles, California. How are you, Justin?
Doing great, Duff. How are you?
Doing very well. Great to have you on board here today.
Thank you.
So just to let you know a little about Justin's background, he has 20 years in the trenches providing guidance to companies about risk, compliance, and information protection. And this involves obviously a lot of working closely with CMOs and website e-commerce management types within all kinds of organizations. Most notably, he manages the information security team for Max Studio Brands. And he's an expert in apparel, fashion, retail, wholesale, and most in general, e-commerce. So Justin, once again, just glad to have you here today.
Thank you so much. Glad to be able to provide some helpful information for people to help kind of decipher some of the risks and complexities around information security and protection.
That's great. So let's get into it. Today we're talking about risk, and obviously this is a big subject. Our audience is primarily CMOs and people that are marketing directors. So the question is for them, what things do they really need to know in order to stay safe right now within their own area of the organization? And how do they participate to make security happen? And I guess maybe one of the things that for me would be a great place to start would be if you could just begin by talking about some of the 2 or 3 most common scenarios for a security breach that you would see typically in your work.
Sure. No, that's great. So what we're seeing a lot of, or most commonly, I should say, not a lot of, but more commonly is loss of information, data leakage from an organization, whether it's their servers or some of the systems that they use. Somebody gaining access to an account, whether it's through a password or some other means of access into something that wasn't as protected as it should have been. We're still seeing the most common means of trying to gain information, steal information is still coming in from email. The vast majority of threats that we see on a regular basis are email related. Those pesky junk emails that come in and say, click here, click there. Yes. They've gotten far more sophisticated, right? I'm sure you've seen quite a few of those, and it's so hard to tell sometimes. Do I click on that? Is it really UPS? Is it really, Apple asking me to reset my password?
Those things are extremely tricky, and I worry about my parents, and because I will be fooled for a second. Even I think I'm known to be like, oh wait, no, hold on. So yeah, click something.
It is, and we still see, every time I see them, I still scratch my head and say, "Wow, they just don't give up trying to dupe people." And I think the reality is it must work. I do hear from other colleagues and people I work with in the security community that is how that they generally have gotten in when there's been a pretty significant issue, whether there's been data stolen or data locked down and then asked for some sort of a payout to get the data back. So bottom line from a security perspective is we say always be cautious over curious. Always, whether it's family members, friends, loved ones, coworkers, I would pick up the phone, text, and say, "Hi, just checking. You sent me that message? Okay, cool. All right, just checking." And then, go ahead and at that point, if it's validated, click on it. But almost, I would take a posture of never clicking anything unless you're pretty much 100% certain, because it's just too risky. It's just if they get past that, they're going to be able to gain access to a world of information. So that's the best. That's some of the best things to do in terms of sort of keeping an eye out for things. Check email or open an email that you might not be 100% sure about, but you're 99.9% sure about on an iPad or your iPhone, maybe something that's not your computer connected to anything like a banking account or has all of your most highly protected accounts associated with it. So use some other device or something, or even so. For me, I have a separate computer that I use just for internet and checking things, and then my computer that I use for monitoring and managing systems is completely different, and I don't let other people use that computer, and I don't log into Yahoo email or anything third party.
Smart.
I just do what I need to do on that machine. So lastly, we still see a lot of malicious websites. There's still plenty of sites where if you type the wrong URL in, you might unfortunately get redirected to a site that doesn't look kosher or look okay to click on. My advice there is just get out right away. Just don't click through it. Don't try to find the way to click out of it. Turn the computer off if you're not sure. Just shut it down. Just shut it down. And then the last thing we see, unfortunately, a lot of is the old-fashioned catfish / social engineering attempts by people to just call you, ask you for information, say they're from some organization that gives them some authority to the point where people feel like they're compelled to share with them. So be really, it's interesting because there's plenty of very, very sophisticated operations in the cyber criminal area, but the easy stuff is the stuff that we really try to just, if you can get rid of that, you can really lower your risk levels significantly. So that's why I always go back to those really simple things as much as possible. Our best defense, I'm 100% convinced, is what we do in our behavior and our habits.
Well, let's widen that discussion a little bit because I'm very interested in that. And that's a great area to start in with the kind of breaches that people might be experiencing. Some of them they might have experienced, some of them might have heard about, some of them might not have heard about yet or experienced. But surely there must be kind of an ongoing set of work that must be done, certain processes that should be in place, certain things the board of directors would want to know is taking place on a regular basis and maybe want to see some feedback from, like what is happening, how are improvements being made, where are the risks for us. So what as a CMO, what would you want to see in place to know that your company is probably safe?
Great questions. I would break it down and put it in a simple, sort of easy to remember as much as possible. I call it the APA sort of methodology. And this is A for awareness, P for partnerships, and then A for action. And so touching on that just for a minute, the awareness is spreading the knowledge and briefing all staff members on what to look out for. The leadership here is key for people in management marketing roles, from the CMO to the staff and management that works below and under and with the CMO. Don't wait for IT or the head of IT security to come to you. Go to them and be proactive. I hear a lot and talk a lot with CMOs in regards to their role and how much more they're required to do to know across the organization, whether they're in performance management in terms of marketing, or they're on the brand side helping grow in that regard. There's a lot on their plate, and so try not to feel like this is overwhelming and unapproachable. Just go into it, really just go into it and try to continue to create those conversations and not take the position of you need to become the IT person in charge of this or, be at their level per se, but have a good dialogue with them and get across in that leadership sort of manner that it's important to you, it's important to the brand. And I think customers generally want that approach as well. So incorporating a strong posture and a proactive, savvy posture around security and risk and defense is, I think, very good for marketing in general. And I think from a career perspective, it's a very strong value add because 4 or 5 years ago, we used to see the risk and cyber security people more embedded in the IT department. In the last few years, the risk and head of cyber, the CISOs, for example, the chief information security officers, are at the very highest levels of leadership and within the organization. So aligning with those people, I think, is a good way to further encourage and grow your own career path, and make sure you're part of the thought process and the leadership in the organization. So awareness is first. That includes yourself getting up to speed on some basic stuff, making sure you're kind of following a good practice with regards to your passwords and strong passwords. Using things like two-factor authentication is a must. It's a requirement.
Yeah,
It's a requirement now. There's still some places where you can opt out. You could say, I don't need it. I choose not to use it.
yeah, it's so tempting.
Yeah, anywhere where it matters, I would highly, highly recommend it. And I mean, I'm not just saying that as a security professional. I'm saying it because every vendor on the planet is basically, if not making it mandatory, about to make it mandatory. So resistance is futile in that regard, as far as I'm concerned. I mean,
safety first.
Yeah, and what's one of the nice things about setting up a two-factor situation is once you set it up and you enable it, a lot of times actually your machine will allow you a little bit more fluid connectivity, so you don't always have to put those codes in. And then by enabling that, it keeps all the other possibilities of people connecting to your systems at a much lower risk. So that's something I just had to put a shout out for go to factor. And there's many different ways of doing that. We won't get too deep into the technical here, but awareness, education, get that knowledge spread throughout the organization. Talk it over with people. Make it a part of your stand-ups. Make it a part of your meetings. And don't just look at it as a pure IT-centric operation. Partner with IT on that awareness. And so the awareness is the first pillar. Partnership is the second, where you're aligning with your internal IT, or a lot of companies, as you know, Duff, have outsourced relationships with their service providers.
Yes.
So security or IT. So make sure your partner, you have a part of the conversation with those folks as well, that incorporates the security areas that you want to touch on, and just ask the questions. If you're not sure what to ask, just kind of put it out there. Just say, hey, we want it to be, make sure we're doing our due diligence. We really have a keen interest here. If you get pushback, I have seen so much pushback in certain areas here. We're all busy. Everybody's busy, and they've got work to do and deadlines and such. The bottom line is always a driving force in businesses. So, but figure out a time and a place, and just don't give up. Do not give up, because the worst time to be having these conversations is when an event happens. And we don't sit back and say, oh, you're going to get hit or it's going to happen. I mean, we don't want to sound like that kind of a doomsday sort of perspective. Sure. But the reality is, it's when, not if. So,
well, it could be
small or it could be large. It could be a mini breach, or it could be a significant breach where you're on the news, like Sony or Target or something along those lines.
Well, I think what I'm hoping people will walk away with today is that, hopefully some information that's going to help keep them from that happening. And one of the things, I guess, that would help for me, sort of my business too, is just a sense of what information is especially important to protect, and what should be. There's a lot of information that's kind of discarded, particularly in the marketing systems, people's background information, all kinds of credit card numbers. Like, what should be discarded and what should be kept without? I mean, obviously, there's hard to generalize, but how does a company kind of come up with that set of things? What's the best way to find those parameters?
That's a great question. Because traditionally it has always been thought of as credit card numbers or banking information. And of course that is absolutely the case, but it also includes third-party information on people, demographics. Marketing departments have a lot of information on email for their email campaigns. They have maybe phone numbers. They'll have be ethnicity, income levels. I mean, there's a profiling and a lot of information there. So I would be keen on anything that pertains to a person. And think of it I always stress, think of it from your own perspective as well. What information would you not want to be leaked out in the event of a breach? So And a lot of times this information may be difficult to determine where it's kept, because a lot of times it's baked into some service provider or IT
Yes.
service, right? So a lot of times the chief marketing officer and their team are just like, well, we just go to those people and they take care of it. So I've seen a lot of that,
Yeah,
and
it's
I think,
scary.
yeah, it's scary. And so I think approaching those people, whoever, I'm that those people technically would be me, like the IT folks. And I'm trying to put a shout out here for any IT folks listening to this to please partner more and go out and break bread and create some relationships if there isn't any already with your other thought leaders in the organization and management teams. So we're all in it together. When something hits the fan in an organization, the legal and the investigation committee are going to, people are going to bring everybody to the table. And so first thing they're going to probably look for, and I've been in a few of these, I've been around these, I've heard how these go, is they look for just where was the continuity? Was there any, miscommunications between departments on who was in, and ownership? They're going to ask who owned this, whose responsibility is this? And
Mm,
so, I mean, I would much rather be in a situation where we say, look, we worked together on it. We had our discussions. Um, I mean, companies go as far as having minutes in their. They make sure it's documented
that
that they
makes a
had.
lot of sense.
Yeah, I highly recommend documenting any of this, especially if you get any pushback in your organization, so that you are on record as being a thought leader and being the person who was asking these questions.
Mm.
So I would say if you're not sure what to protect, protect more than less. Absolutely.
Well, let
But
me ask you something.
anything around people, I would say is very keen, and anything that you collect, especially, we're going to touch on that here with our CCPA discussion, right?
Yeah, it's time to ask you about that, actually. I appreciate you bringing that up because my understanding is this went into effect in January and it has some really big implications for e-commerce websites. And people might be saying CCPA what? So maybe just give us a quick little background on that and what the implications might be for chief marketing officers.
Absolutely. Well, so CCPA is the California Consumer Privacy Act that went into effect, into law, January 2020.
Mm.
I'm not a lawyer or per se giving this a legal advice here. I'm just, I speak with them and I work with them closely, and we work hand in hand. Security, risk, and information protection are all sort of under the same umbrella right now. And so, we're trying to protect people's information, and the legal community is trying to give more rights to people that are trying to also look out for where their information is being used by third parties like marketing teams and things like that. So basically, a couple of quick little tidbits on CCPA are companies are required to know and let customers know what data is being collected. So there's a legal requirement now for a company that does any kind of data collection, whether it's something like an IP address, it's a operating system. This is sort of like IT information that can be gathered when
Mm-hmm.
customers go to your site or check out from your site or interact with you in any way. Um, your location information, really any information that you might gather in any cookies or any targeting of any kind. So the consumer can now say, hey, what do you collect on me? And some of this information, you might think, well, it's no big deal, but the reality is it's law now. And so
Yes.
um, companies need to be able to respond to these requests from consumers, and they need to basically say what information is collected and how is the information used. So a lot of sites now you're going to see, and we've been seeing tons of these where it's popping up those disclaimers about CCPA, and it's very important that you have either a phone number or an email address. A lot of people have an email address that can direct the consumer to some contact in your organization to basically if they want to talk about this or hear about this. So you have to have a process
Mm-hmm.
in place. Um, so that kind of touches on it just a little bit, right?
Yeah, that's really a strong overview. And
I
kind of
actually wanted
speaks.
to real quick. I'm
Yeah,
sorry
no,
to
go
cut you. I
ahead.
wanted to add one more little bit in there.
Yeah, please do.
There's also an opt out requirement, from what I understand, where their consumers want to know that they have the ability to still engage with your brand or your site, but can they, in that process, opt out from any data collection? So
Mm.
the key pillars here are the key takeaway points are you have to let them know what you're collecting. If they ask you what you're doing with it, you have to be prepared to sort of share some information on that. And then lastly, you need to allow them an opt out option, so that they could have some path where basically they could say, I don't feel comfortable. So that's the key areas that, as far as I know, that I'm familiar with. I have heard that enforcement hasn't been really strong on it yet, but I hear that that's coming, particularly midsummer is some of the targeting I've been hearing. And I won't share any details, but I will tell you that I've seen some legal matters around um, some of the not only CCPA, not so much CCPA, but around the ADA, disabilities for websites and things like that.
Yes.
That's been very costly for businesses that are not meeting requirements. So I think there's going to be a lot more scrutiny for companies to really be careful to not get hit with some pretty hefty fines.
I can imagine. Yeah. Well, that actually then is perfect lead into what I want to ask you about next.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've been in many organizations that don't have like someone designated as like a risk or security officer. So before something goes wrong, where does the ownership for it usually lie? Obviously, it's going to report probably some very senior part of the executive committee or something. But to what extent? Who are the usual cast of characters, and who usually leads that charge?
That's a great question. The relationships in all these areas are so vital, and it's so important to have these relationships before an event occurs, right? Because it too oftentimes companies think, well, I'll just call somebody, I'll call a third party when we need to. So the relationships need to be in place ahead of time, and there's actually quite a few different relationships that we've been working with over the last couple of years. For example, one is the cyber insurance people. I always put that out there as a really, really important partner to have in place ahead of time. I would maybe, as a chief marketing officer, I'd maybe just ask some questions around the organization to see if there's a policy or if something exists. At least that's what I've been doing over the last couple of years. It's just always bringing that question up. And then the really good news is once those people get involved and you start to work a little more with them, they actually have a lot of information. They're kind of like an HR department, so to speak, for cyber defense and cybersecurity. They're very, very good with messaging and documentation and tips and guidance. Because their whole hope is that there will be no breach and they can basically lower their risk. So
yes,
year over year, I'm seeing a lot more information coming out of those people, and they've been pretty helpful with getting the messaging out. So those third parties are really important. But I would say, other than your primary third party group that you work with, that sort of whether it's your internal IT or outsourced IT, have another level of oversight to give you essentially what we call a sanity check, which is sort of a little extra peace of mind. Those are sometimes tough to do because it can get a little contentious about sharing this sensitive information with more than one party, and a lot of times the IT security folks are generally very protective of these areas and don't want to talk. So I would encourage this, and it may not work for everybody, but if possible, have that third party look things over and give you some peace of mind, especially from a non-IT perspective. I think, like as a CEO or a CMO, I would have I would engage with a third party to give you that counterpoint perspective, and don't just take the single point of view of your internal department that's in charge. It's not that we don't trust them. It's just, we want to basically have another layer of peace of mind is what I'm talking about. So what do you think, Duff? Are you seeing organizations take that extra level of protection these days, or because to me, I think that's maybe some companies are on the fence with that, or they're not
Mhm.
necessarily comfortable with going down that path.
Well, it seems like it's sort of an exploration right now with what's going on with COVID and everything. It'd be interesting
Yeah.
to see, like, when the cutting begins, and as it will for almost every organization, what will be prioritized and where will that so the budget and responsibility and people resources be still available to do what needs to be. It seems like obviously potentially a hacker's dream what's going on right now, with people just kind of asleep at the wheel or leaving things dangling and normally would have been on top of more. It kind of makes me curious then to kind of get to brass tacks as far as budgeting around this. It seems to me it's very much like insurance, where you want to be protected, but you don't want to over insure and end up wasting money that would otherwise be used to grow and scale and pay employees and do all that. So what are some of the factors that a company should consider when it's thinking about spending on this? And like, how should they be thinking? Are we spending in the right ballpark? Are we low? Are we high? How would you break that down?
That's a great question. So one of the words I use a lot, I talk a lot about is data security hygiene. And as we talk about budgeting and spend, the hygiene around data security and is so vital, so important, and that's sort of that could be so inexpensive compared to what could happen in the event of a breach, or compared to what some of the services and products are that are out there that are very, very expensive in some cases. So having a really good security posture or hygiene, where you always change passwords at a certain time, you make sure strong passwords are in place always, you have that extra factor of authentication always. That's what I mean by hygiene. And when people leave the organization, their systems are disabled, so
Mm-hmm.
that hygiene and that sort of best practice on a kind of simple daily basis is the least expensive, most effective route to go. So I just wanted to
Good.
put a little shout out to that right away. I can't stress that enough. I see so much of that missing inside organizations because it's very complicated and there's a lot of moving parts. And so the more we can get people to come together and work together to all take ownership for some of this, it should lower costs. It should actually provide some of that little extra heavy lifting to some of the, spreading it out throughout the organization. But in terms of spend and budget, definitely a couple of things come to mind. Overspending does not mean extra protection, period. It just
Mm-hmm.
doesn't. I mean, many companies write a check and buy some of the best, and they just sit back and they say we're good. In a lot of cases, that could be somewhat of the case because there is absolutely some very solid, tried and true solutions that come up and are seen everywhere. Like certain firewalls or certain third-party monitoring and management solutions. I mean, we always ask, like, what do you use? What do you use? Are you using this? Using that? What's the latest? What works? What didn't work? Especially if something broke, if there's a breach,
Yeah.
we're like, what'd they have? How'd they get around it? What did they do? And so I would say it's important to talk about these numbers. Again, a big theme of all this is just getting people to kind of try to get over the hurdle and the hump of how scary and how daunting some of this has potentially become, to try to make it a little bit more approachable. And start small, figure out if you are missing something. There's a very clear path of, okay, these things need to be in place. So a seasoned IT professional, security professional should be able to look over an organization even in a short amount of time and just check off the low-hanging fruit of, do they have or not have what is sort of 2020 and 2021 standards for protection. That actually could be done really, really quickly. So I would prioritize some budgeting towards building those trusted relationships that you plan to lean on before, during, and after in any kind of events. And just keep talking about what kind of numbers can be put out there. I'm I will always advocate for a little more spend than less when it comes to security and risk.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely there needs to be a balance, because especially with how tough business is going, with coronavirus and stuff. Yeah, it's changing a lot, a lot. The one thing I will say though is, after doing this for quite a few years,
Mm-hmm.
there's a few years where we really feel like we have been just really beaten back, and the bad actors have kind of taken sort of a foothold in the whole thing. And there's still a sediment in that, in a sense, because there's a lot more bad actors than there ever was, and they're more organized, and there's state actors in different countries that are at work, and much more business around this now. But the tools and the people and the solutions that are out there are really, really good. Like, there's some really good stuff out there that, again, is part of, like, always be vigilant, always be asking, like, are we using this? Do they have that? It might even just take one service provider that's kind of got a really good sound, like, proactive, up to date security mindset, to just say, you should have, here's some recommendations. That's actually something I would highly recommend, is to determine if you feel like you're dealing with people that are working in a modern, present day security sort of methodology mindset, or are you dealing
Mm.
with people that have a traditional, what we've done over the last decade mindset. Like, everybody needs to come to the table here, but I will just put it out there that I'm much more in favor of the forward thinking when it comes to security and protection. And now, that doesn't mean go buy the latest and greatest or use something brand new that isn't tested. Doesn't necessarily mean that. And I definitely don't advocate going and just spending money on some new upstart solution that has come around in the last year or two. They need to be vetted out. You need to make sure makes sense, but definitely be aware, know what's coming. There's just a ton of new things and new companies that are in these spaces, and some of them may make a lot of sense. And maybe if you don't hear it from, if you might hear it from one vendor to say, hey, take a look at this company, and then another vendor says, yeah, we use that company. That's actually one of the best ways that we go by, in terms of, okay, that's sort of vetting it out a little bit, because we're seeing
Mm-hmm.
who's using what. But the landscape is changing quite a bit, actually, right now. I'd say, given the pandemic, unfortunately, that we're all living through, and that's changing things, and the way that things are shifting into the cloud and out of the cloud. And there's all sorts of different bolt-ons, third-party services that are added into websites, blogs
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. That all these things need to be patched, maintained, kept up to date. So, um, you know, it, a lot of this is so overwhelming that a lot of companies just say, okay, let me just check off the key boxes, and then I'm good, and
Yeah.
write a couple of big checks and I'm fine, right? Like, home security, pay those folks to come around the house, put the signs in front. With IT and information security, it's much more of a ongoing, hands-on. You got to really get in there. You got to talk to your people. You want to get awareness flowing. You want to make it something that is not scary, and not, oh, we're coming after you, to lock your computers down. No, like, hey, let's do you have any questions? Do you want to come to us and, ask us, about things? I mean, I always encourage that. Um, so we could try to provide knowledge when and however possible, so people feel more empowered.
Great.
I want people to feel empowered in this day and
Yeah.
age, not beaten down by these bad actors.
So those are a lot of really important factors to consider. And one of the things you'd mentioned to me is you have this really cool kind of security shortlist that you could share, and people can follow the notes here on the podcast. I'll try to put a link in here if I can. And just some things that people should know. Can you explain a little more what that is and what they might get there?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to share sort of uh, where we're at as of sort of approaching second quarter here, 2020. A couple of key things that chief marketing officers may want to just ask about, and then they could use this information as a way to approach some of their IT leadership, and start a conversation, and then hopefully that will that will lead to, kind of checking some boxes and making people feel like things are in a little better shape. And then you can kind of go from there. Every Q1, Q2, we always do a real sort of look back, look forward, figure out where we're at. We readjust, to kind of make sure that we are not, it's very easy to sit back and sort of leave things as business as usual. And that could easily be, where we were at in 2018 or 2017, for example. And then here we are, 2020, and a lot has changed. Where we were at even from Q3, 4 of 2019 to now was very much night and day from the major companies like Google's, the Amazons, Apple's, Microsoft have been just at record paces, securing and buttoning down and updating and changing. So we've been distilling that. We've been trying to help companies and people adjust to it. So I think hopefully we're settling in. I don't want to say we're settling as it's stopping, but we're starting to feel like it's doable. It feels like a lot more doable. There's more polish in some of these solutions that we're implementing than there was a year ago, where it was a little rougher on the edges to implement some of these additional security measures. Feel a lot more polished right now. So we'll put some takeaways here for people to kind of take with them, and there's learning and growing is always part of the job, right? Whatever role we're in, whether it's lead the department or aspiring to lead the department. So any knowledge gained in these areas is so valuable.
Definitely.
As a career path.
Yeah. Let me ask you then. So in our last minute here, what would be just sort of the key takeaways that people should take then from this? If they were to walk away with 3 things out of their car right now and say, I need to know this, I'm walking right now, what would those be?
I would definitely put at the top of the list, I would say add in some outside assessment. Not somebody who does security as part of their practice, but a firm that specifically is a specialist in this area. Third parties, get your systems, your education, your knowledge base, your users, your brand evaluated. Even if you're like, we're in great shape, if you feel like, we spent a lot of money or renewed this, or we work with, the best brands on the market, just get it checked out. Just ask someone to say, hey, tell me where we're at. And then be open-minded to it. If they come back with a few things that may need improvement, that's okay. They come back and everything's great and then some, that's okay too. So consider those third parties and those other opinions as a value add rather than somebody being critical of whatever it is you're doing. For more of peace of mind, I highly recommend that. And then maybe if you really like them and they work well, hang on to them and work with them in the future as well.
Okay. Anything else?
I would also say just don't give up. As hard as it might be and as much pushback as you might get, whether it's your budgets or your coworkers that are just like, I don't want to hear it. I got so many other fish to fry. If it didn't work on Monday, come back on Wednesday, come back on Friday, just say, hey, as part of our bigger initiatives, let's just make sure we don't let this sort of slide off the radar. Keep vigilant on it, and use it as a way to promote both yourself, your leadership, and add it into the brand. I think good security positioning from a brand perspective is going to resonate with consumers. I know it does for me. I mean, if I work with a brand and I don't feel like, if I don't feel like they're really going above and beyond, or at least trying, I get a little bit of a caution, right? And I would just say, there's no such thing as 100% protection. Obviously, it's kind of redundant. I mean, there's no, zero risk. But buffering the scam of the week is a good place to start, right?
Yes. That's good. Those are some great takeaways and a lot of information here. I really appreciate your just waxing philosophic for us today on this topic. It's something that, as you mentioned, it just doesn't get enough attention. And particularly now, every month it seems to be more and more of an issue. So this is a great primer and a chance to kind of get up to speed on where things are. So Justin Harris, Ion Technology. Thank you so much for being with us here today, sharing your knowledge. Before you go, though, how can our listeners get in touch with you, learn more, ask questions, that sort of thing?
Absolutely. And thanks for having me today. And
Absolutely.
I will put my email address. I'll add a link down there and you can direct message me or email me. I'd be happy to help out and just have an informal conversation if you'd like on how to approach any of this. So yeah, I'm very open-minded and very willing to talk with anybody on this and see where it goes.
Sounds great. Well, all right then, everyone, please stay in touch at amplitudeagency.com and stay tuned for more episodes of the Amplitude Digital E-commerce podcast soon. Thanks again, Justin. Take care.
You too, Duff. Bye-bye.